Hi there. So I'm going to give a talk today on Hegel, Marx, and the offset of that compared to Buddhism. And the basic idea is that Hegel talked about evolution as an idea. Now, he used, I believe, the word spirit or Geist in German. And the whole overall study was called phenomenology. And it was an incredible theory. Hegel is an extremely well-known, extremely influential philosopher. He was from Germany, and I believe in the tradition of the German system makers. Now, Marx falls into this category completely, so does Weber, so does Durkheim. You had a huge amount of philosophers from Germany, natural philosophers, who were extremely influential. And Hegel believed that the way life works is that there is a spirit which goes out, and it's an idea. So idea, spirit are really, really closely related. And so this reality is a spirit and an idea waiting to happen. So it's kind of like the seed for reality and human evolution, world evolution, the evolution of the universe is already there. And it goes out to be fulfilled. Now, at the time, this is in extremely exciting contrast to biblical theories and to the church and to religious theories and that kind of thing. So you can see a slight move towards a scientific basis of phenomenology. Now, whatever views people may have on this is an extremely interesting part of life, because this is describing the very essence of what it is to be. Let's go over to Marx. Now, after having described that, a lot of people may say, well, what on earth has Marx got to do with any of that? Marx is not just what a lot of people think of. A lot of people think of communism. A lot of people think of socialism, politics, trade unions, workers' rights. No, it's not really that. What Marx was an absolute genius. One of the greatest thinkers of all time, without a shadow of a doubt. Possibly top three. I mean, who else could you put there? You could put Socrates, but there's nothing from Socrates really written down, only through Plato. You could put Plato, you could put Aristotle. You could put other people. Noam Chomsky of today comes to mind as somebody, an incredibly lucid thinker. So did Russell Brand, actually. But anyway, move back to the German great theorists. A lot of people would say, what does Marx have in common with that? So, Marx, I believe, you could write a whole book on him called The Spiritual Marx, meaning that what he talks about is so profound that it really goes into the field of unified field, which is of course what greats like Einstein have latched onto, and much more recently than with string theorists and such like. And of course the work of organisations like Science and Non-Duality, John Hegel and great thinkers like this. So, most well known, Marx talked about the material dialectic. So, whereas Hegel was talking about the dialectic, he was talking about the process of evolution. We don't even need to mention Darwin at this point, because Darwin, in a sense, was talking about it in a different way. All amazingly interesting, but Hegel is just such profound exposition of reality. So it's total phenomenology, explanation of universe in terms of deep, profound, abstract thought. Marx came up with the material dialectic, whereas Hegel's was the dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis being a model for change. But Marx was the material dialectic. So he said, yes, evolution and change does happen through thesis, antithesis, producing synthesis, but it happens in terms of the material world, not in terms of idea, not in terms of subtle energy, not in terms of thought. Personally, it is thought. That is the case, that is the fact. It cannot work from material form affecting the rest of evolution. But Marx, the genius nonetheless, and a great thinker that he was, believed that it was the social conditions, if you like, that affect actually, if you like, the upper range of reality. So Marx would say that the key motor for this was people's means or relationship to the means of production. So this was Marx's thought at its essence, that it is the means of production that are a key motor for the way reality is and our experience of life. Underneath, that's what's being talked about. So you have then with Marx the kind of ideas whereby you can see how it leads on to workers of the world. You have only your, to lose your chains, and it's, up to your hands in that material sense, saying that, these things should be overthrown and da-da-da-da-da. Now, I don't believe in that at all, actually. But the thought of it is, the level of thought is just Marx. Amazing. So you've got these two great thinkers, Hegel and Marx. Hegel saying that all phenomena in the universe begins in the higher level. It begins in the highest level of abstract thought. It's like there's a seed for reality to evolve, and it comes from thought. Again, this is completely different to Darwin. You would have to put Darwin more in a material dialectic as well, because if you look at Darwin and his theories on evolution, let's take somebody who was a Darwinist, Jonathan Morris, I believe. It's a long time since I've looked at the book, but he wrote The Beak of the Finch, which talks about how evolution happens. Taking the beak of the finch as an example, evolution happens by a direct relationship between physical anatomy and the conditions in which one exists. So if there was a summer where there was drought and food had to be dug out from the ground, then the finches with a certain shaped beak were likely to do better, thus procreate, thus this anatomical form is propagated and furthered. So this would be a Darwinistic thought, really, on evolution. So then you can bring in diversity, you can bring in adaptivity and such concepts, such like afterwards. So you'd have to say that Darwin also was much more similar with Marx. So you had these two kind of, Marx just before, then Darwin, and you see a great influence of this idea of material. Now, Hegel's right. It is the Geist. The word Geist in German means ghost in a sense, but intellect in this sense, really. It's saying that the upper echelons of the mind are profound in their influence. Now shift over to Buddhism. Okay, so when we say Buddhism, we can take any Eastern philosophy, so we can take Vedanta as well. We can also take meditation as an access point to this, in a sense. So what you see in Buddhism is the three different realms, let's say, you see. So very often in Buddhism you'll hear of the realm of the senses, and then the world of form and the formless world. So you see these three realms. Now in the world of form, the upper levels, if you look at the Buddhistic classification of evolution, straight away this is on a subtle level, this is on a level of thought. What you'll see in terms of meditation is that within the Buddhist tradition, there are four main levels. Now these four main levels are where the word Zen comes from, actually. The word Zen comes from the word jhana, which is the Sanskrit word for these levels as they exist in reality, in terms of your refinement of thought. And what happens when you get into this refinement of thought is that you move away from, on a base level, you move away from, in the context of what we're talking about, you move away from obstruction, you move away from base properties, you move away from gross capacities. And if we're looking at thought as an electrical impulse, as something which is a part of the universe, rather than something, people often think they kind of thoughts belong to them. They don't really. Thoughts are a thing of their own, really. So if you look at it that way, then you'll see that in the Buddhist understanding, and we're talking Hinayana, early Buddhism of the Pali Canon, then there is a link between these two topics of Hegel and Marx in terms of evolution of oneself. But of course, when you're refining your thought in that level, what happens to you? We move towards concepts such as extreme well-being, bliss, and my notion to put forward in this talk is that the Hegelian understanding of evolution, the highest realms of thought, the Geist, the phenomenology of the spirit, is definitely equatable with the Buddhist notion of model of attainment of refined thought. Now, in the Buddhist understanding, there are 31 levels which you can go up, where you're still not at the highest level. I would say that this absolute highest level is, if you like, pure intelligence. And I would say that that is also what scientists talk about as the unified field. So looking at Einstein's theory of relativity to start with, going on to through the 100 years of the last century up to the string theorists, and the understanding that everything is affectable by thought. This is part of science these days. So there's a real link up between these three things. Lesser extent Marx, and I'm saying that genius nonetheless, the material dialectic is not correct. Phenomenology, true evolution, does happen in idea form. And you'll notice this because how important is it for you to be in sync with your ideas as a human, to feel great, to have that feeling of evolution? And I think that Hegel got it, and I think that Hegel's phenomenology of the Geist, of the spirit, if you like, and the Buddhist explanation of reality are really compatible. I'd also say that there's a amazing link up between with the Buddhist psychology, the 12 nidanas. And what this is an extremely effective model for human behaviour. And what you'll see in the 12 nidanas is a relationship between thought and behaviour. This has a massive bearing within Buddhist understanding on one's own direction and one's own well-being, one's own personal evolution in life. And again, we're right back at Hegel with the idea being the key motor for not just human change, but for change of the whole world. That's it. Thanks very much.